Welcome to Insemination. Today is going to be an Insemination First. This is going to be a two-parter episode. This next episode is going to be with not just a donor-conceived person, but also a product of fertility fraud, my very good friend, David Barry. David Barry is the biological son of Dr. Morris Wortman, who recently deceased in a plane crash. And I am so grateful that David is taking the time to walk us through the entirety of this incredibly complex story of how he found out he was donor conceived, finding out that he's Dr. Morrison's biological son, the entire just storyline of all of his siblings, and of course the legality issue, which is the fertility fraud legislation. So to honor the absolute obvious complexity of this story, we are doing a two-parter episode. So buckle up, buttercups, it is going to get intense. So let's dive into part one. And welcome to Insemination, David! How are you doing, my friend?
Man, it's just so good to come in here and just be together to talk about this and all of this.
Do you know what I was realizing recently? That I think I would be a better person and my life would be like 10 times better if like once a week, if you, Jacoba, and I just got to have brunch together once a week, everything would be better.
It would be better, right? We'd probably be seated like at some sort of diner with like old-fashioned Formica tabletops, you know,
Yes.
Eating hash browns. I'm with it.
Oh my God.
Jacoba, answer our call.
Jacoba, we love you, baby. For anyone who doesn't know, Jacoba was the person I interviewed in my second episode. Jacoba is the essentially head narrator of the documentary Our Father. If you've not watched it, please go watch it. But yes, I'm so lucky that I have been able to connect with the awesome donor conceived community. But David, I will say that I'm very grateful for the special, bond that you and I have also formed. You have become an amazing friend, like within like 5 minutes. It really was like we're friends. We get that.
I didn't have the time to take it slow. We just had to get to where we needed to be, and we're there.
We're there. Well, I think that does, it helps. I feel like, when I wear a sperm costume in front of somebody for the first time, that breaks barriers very fast.
It's a hell of an icebreaker. Yeah. In fact, I think I had a chance to meet you without sperm.
But it was true.
It was minutes, like it wasn't a huge time for me to get to know you before you were sperm. But I agree. I think it really helped expedite the process, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, David, let's hop to it because this is going to be a hell of an episode. So, just to get everybody kind of on the same plane, David, you are not just a donor conceived person. You are also a product of fertility fraud, and not just a product of fertility fraud. You are the biological son of Dr. Wartman of Rochester, New York, who recently died in a plane crash.
That is correct.
How are you doing? How are you feeling? Because this feels like a lot of complicated emotions.
How are you doing? There are a lot of them. Yeah. It's potpourri of feelings, just a little bit of everything sort of baked in there. I will fill in context for anybody who perhaps is not as aware as we are of that event, which is to say Dr. Wortman was killed just 2 weeks ago in a plane crash in Western New York. And I received that information like a lot of people did, which was shock. And I feel like that is probably the most overworked adjective that probably happens in our collective space. But when you think about, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of this as we go, like the process of things that we've uncovered over the course of several years.
Yeah.
I remember confidently saying to friends and peers, I don't think anything else can surprise me. And I genuinely believe that. I was like, no, we've covered all of it. And then to hear that news was just like, you idiot, how dare you open your mouth and suggest that there's nothing left here that can surprise you. It was just like, of all the things I could have had on my bingo card, this was hardly it. And I say that with some lightness, but I've had 2 weeks to digest the feelings, the experience of it. And one of the, there are several lenses that I try to put this through for myself. The first is if he had not died in a plane crash, if he had died that day of natural causes, would my reaction be different? And the truth is, I'm still not sure. I know that the shock
It's
of
been
a plane
2
crash,
weeks. Yeah, I think
yeah,
that this is still, the wound is still exceptionally fresh. We're still putting bandages on it.
right. And you know, people have asked me, and I'm going to do my best to give an answer to it now. How do I feel? And the truth is, it's a lot like how I experienced him in life is similar to how I feel about him in death. And it's ambivalence, which is to say, and I know this is a taboo for a lot of people who are in my shoes and others like me, to say this is not an altogether negative thing that has happened, because I am here and I possess qualities that I live with every single day that I feel are extensions of who I am. And there's no denying that in some way, shape, or form, at least 50% of those qualities on a genetic spectrum were brought by him. And I can never undo that. That's something that I will always wrestle with, because there are parts of it that I'm happy with who I am most days. But I also have to recognize that part of who I am is a genetic mirror of someone who I and a lot of others have many misgivings about. And the hard thing about this, and what will always be true, and certainly perhaps more so in death, is recognizing that those two things have to coexist, that there are two truths that would seem to kind of be in conflict, but they are not. And I live, I'm a living example of what those two truths are, which is gratitude for my life, and total misgiving and anger toward not necessarily exclusively myself, but certainly for my mother and some of my half siblings who've had, if you can think about it, less dramatic stories, or actually, I'm sorry, even more dramatic stories than I have had, even in their same familial circle. And yeah, it is complex, which is perhaps not a great answer, but it's the one that
No,
I've got today.
but that's no, to me that is a good answer, because that's what it is. There is no way we can talk about what this is. There's no way that we can talk about any of this donor conception, infertility. There's so much nuance and complexity to this.
Yeah.
And your answer to me was a very good encompassing feeling that I feel like a lot of donor conceived people wrestle with, especially the thing that a lot of donor conceived people wrestle with when they find out their donors are not really great people. And unfortunately, you are one of the people who has a particularly not great donor. And I don't even feel like is the right term for what for what you have, but supplier, forcer, I don't know what the right word is, but
both are accurate.
Yeah. And because so many of us find out, because donors are typically really propped up in our society of like, look at the good that they did, look at the gift that they gave you, and then and so we always have that sort of cooking in the back of our head, only to find out when we're older that, for again, not everybody, but for a lot of us, including myself, our donors aren't great. They're actually they're not great individuals. And I kind of, I do believe that this, how the infertility industry recruits donors, particularly attracts donors with not great intentions. Again, some donors are great, and I don't want to put down all donors, because some donors really actively donate with altruistic purposes. I'm just saying that a lot of donors don't do it, and the industry attracts that. And then obviously, particularly in your case and in many other donor conceived people's cases, you also have the fertility fraud aspect. And just to make sure that this is underlined and everybody understands in case they are confused, fertility fraud is when a doctor purposely switches out the chosen donor DNA for their own or any other that they feel like. And Dr. Wortman is one of the doctors who switched out the chosen donor sperm for his own. And how many siblings have you found so far?
Should have a better count, but the last I knew there were 18 if you include his known children, the daughters that and children that he raised, with his wife, and wife plural, because had been remarried. So yeah, to the best of my knowledge, that number is 18, including all of us. And however, and I'm sure you've alluded to this, but 15% generally seems to be the accepted number of people who've actually taken some sort of a commercial over-the-counter, DNA test, which to me always means that the real number is at a minimum 7 to 8 times that, because people have chosen not to get tested. So 18 is enough to feel disoriented by. Jacoba, if you're listening, I hope I never to catch your number, which is north of 100 now.
Jacoba, some new siblings have just found their way into the Dr. Klein pod. Yeah. Just
there they are.
Yep. Some more is going to be coming forward, but yeah, more of recently they've been connected. And it's, that's the way it's going to be. And I'm sure the same thing is going to be for you and your pod. You're slowly going to find more and more siblings. But what I would love to do is start at the beginning of your story. Let's go through this. So let's start at the very beginning, which is a very good place to start for all of my music theater nerds out there. When did you find out that you were donor conceived?
It was September of 2017. And it was a couple days before. Oh, no,
you are another geriatric discovery.
Yes.
Not just late geriatric.
A late bloomer in so many ways in my life. We'll talk about that on another podcast. That's when I found out. My journey into this began at Christmas 9 months prior. And it's funny when you sort of start to unpeel all of your decisions and kind of think about what your motivation was. It actually starts with a pretty funny story. My sister, her then boyfriend, is now married to an Italian American, and I'm from Rochester, New York, which you had mentioned, and I also want to call out Laura High knows Rochester quite well as a Nazareth grad.
Yes, I know the Wegmans and I know the garbage plates too well.
It's everything you need to know. So if you haven't been to Rochester, Laura has just covered it for you.
Oh yeah, no, that's and I mean, we won't mention the snow. The snow, if I never see snow again in my life, I will be a happy individual.
You're gonna be fine. I feel the same way. It's actually, I can handle the snow. It's the gray that I can't handle.
Oh my God.
It's the 50 shades of it. But anyways, so certain parts of Rochester where I'm from have high Italian American population concentrations. In particular, the ironic name for the town I'm from, which is Greece. There's not a very big Greek population there. There is a very large Italian American population. So I provide that for context, which is to say, my sister's then boyfriend is telling us a friend of his, Italian American, Italian coat of arms, tattoo on his shoulder.
Oh my God.
I've not met the man, but I imagine he's got the leather jacket, the chains and the whole thing. He's all about it. Takes a DNA test and he is Irish. He is very not Italian. And so this is not.
Oh no, is he going to get re-tattooed?
I don't know what to do about that for the poor guy. I look over, to my parents and, talking to my dad, who to this day, for better or worse, does not know a lot about his family. His mother, he knows a little bit more about, but his father passed, I want to say at the age of 41, when my father was 6 or 7 years old, and never really had much of a relationship that he remembers with his dad. So Barry, my last name, Berry, not a super complicated name to figure. Pop it into the Google machine. It's Irish or British, for most likely. And I'm like, well, Dad, if I take this DNA test, we can really find out for sure, where your dad's from. I'm like, awesome, right?
Oh God.
And so it's on sale, and I order it, and I show the phone to my family, and my sister's like, you're such an asshole, which is my sister's lovely, loving way of saying, I'm the only type of person in our family who's going to send himself on this self-assigned voyage to go figure out something that nobody's asking for. So I kind of forget about it. And then I see, as everybody does, an Ancestry.com TV commercial, I think in March, the following spring. And I'm like, right, I sent in my test. I should try to log in to see if my results are there. And they're there. So I open it up, and I want to clarify, again, if you're listening to this, you've probably are either aware of this experience or you've gone through it yourself, which is the first time you go in, you don't really know what you're looking at. And I know Ancestry has actually changed, in the years since I've used it. The first thing that I see is this very big map. And it tells you, percentages of, of your DNA makeup. And part of it makes sense, which is I'm German and Dutch on my mother's side. And that sort of reinforced what I understood. But then so on my dad's side of the family, the question mark side of me not really knowing, it shows that I'm 52% Ashkenazi Jewish. Now, I
Mazel,
feel
my friend.
Mazel. I feel reasonably well versed in some of the language, but I have to confess, in 2017, in the spring of 2017, I didn't know the difference between an Ashkenazi Jewish person and a Sephardic Jew, for example, or
Yeah.
whatever. So I had to Google what does Ashkenazi mean for the purposes of where are they from.
Yo, I had to do the same thing when I first found out as well. I found out 2015 that I was half Jewish for the first time. And I was like, Ashkenazi, what is that? And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. But yeah, no, I had to look that up too. I didn't know.
At first glance, it doesn't make any sense. But I start poking around and it'll tell you most of the countries of origin that comprise this ethnicity. And it's never 100% certain. It's just based on the volume of data that they have at the time. And you look in there and you can see some Germanic and Eastern European countries. And I'm just, again, you're rationalizing based on the stories that you've been told. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe dad's family was from Germany. I don't know. Like I can make sense of that. The part that I cannot make sense of is that I have a very close DNA match, and her name listed in the thing is M. Hellquist, I think, and it says we have 1,500 something centimorgans in common. Again, a word that I had never heard before. I had to Google what is a centimorgan and what does it mean, inside of Ancestry. And at the time, Ancestry, I think, has changed this practice, but it projected us as she was either my aunt, my first cousin, or my half sibling. And
wow, it gave all of those choices.
It gave all those options. It was like a buffet. I was like, I'm at Ponderosa back in the 90s. This
oh
is a big
my God,
moment
that's
for me.
hysterical.
So I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, well, she's not my aunt. I'm older than this person. That I know that happens, but it seemed very, very unlikely. So I go to the things that seem most plausible. And then I also rule out half sibling because I'm thinking, no, like my parents had struggled to conceive. I knew that. My parents were married in 79. I was born in 84. And I knew that they had struggled to conceive when I was born. That was a big deal. And I mean, because look, jokes aside. And I know that between my sister, who was born 6 years later, they had a miscarriage, basically smack in the middle of that around year 3. So I was like, there's not a scenario where one of my parents would have been out there doing anything other than trying to start their own family. It was what I believed. And then landing on first cousin, that immediately started to click in place for me. I had an uncle who got out of the Marines in the early 80s and didn't get on his feet as easily, I think, as he had hoped when he returned. And so I'm thinking, who's the type of person who would, maybe need a few extra bucks to donate sperm, who's healthy and young or whatever. I'm like,
okay,
I'll bet you it's my uncle who, is connected to her somehow. So, and I won't belabor all of these details, but I do end up exchanging some messages with M, who happens to be Morgan Hellquist, and we were sort of playing a game of chess a little bit. Like being on a.
See that? Okay, a little bit of backstory. So this is just how the world is so small. I went to college with Morgan. And so I met Morgan. Morgan was a senior. I was a freshman. We were in Vagina Monologues together. And we found out, I want to say like 75% of the way through rehearsals, that we were both sperm donor babies. And we both were the first other sperm donor conceived people that we had ever met. And it was this moment of holy shit. And I remember specifically Morgan looked at me and she was like, do you ever do the thing where you look in the mirror and you look at like the features that you know are your mom's and you try and figure out what does your dad look like? And I'm like, yes! And it was the first time I heard that kind of validation. And so it was a very, very incredible experience. So it was like there was always a very special connection with Morgan. But when you're saying that like you and Morgan like were playing chess together, I'm like, yeah, no, that makes sense because Morgan is that 100% that like very incredible, like shrewd kind of human being where she is going to absolutely make sure that, she knows exactly who you are. and what is going on. And
100%.
I love that about her. Okay,
Yeah.
so keep
And,
going.
and credit to her, because so I'm gonna tell you information that I didn't know when I was having conversations with her. Morgan had, number one, she had known she was donor conceived. She did tell me that through our first exchange of messages, and that was part of her origin story. So I didn't hear that thinking, oh, well, that means I'm donor conceived. No, I was thinking whoever it is that's, in my family that has made us, connected, that's probably her biological father. In a literal sense, that is true. What I didn't know at the time was that she had developed more than theories. She had some real solid guesses as to how I was related to her. I had landed on, like I said, on first cousin. I spoke to my parents about it, as might be expected, and and I don't want to say like credit to them, but in the reality of the situation was that she hadn't really been speaking to her brothers as often during that period of time. And so she was like, well, look, I would prefer if you don't go digging into this, because I'm not trying to, ruffle feathers and stuff like that. And again, that made sense to me. So Morgan and I exchanged, a handful more messages over, we'll call it the next 6 weeks. And I kind of let it go. Fast forward to September of 2017. Here's another wild card. My wife, Jessica, and her sister, Dara, are both adopted from different, biological families, but, raised as sisters through the same family. So her sister, Jesse's sister, Dara, comes over to our house one night and says, I got to tell you guys something. I found my biological father and I have a half sister. And we're like, wow, this is crazy. So she starts, telling us how she pieced this together. Dara had an Ancestry.com DNA test. Dara matched with her half sister with a certain number of centimorgans. And now, mind you, I haven't opened Ancestry in probably 4 or 5 months at this point. She tells me that she has, I think, 1,100 centimorgans in common with her half sister. And all of a sudden, I just feel like frozen in place, because I'm like, I am almost positive I have more DNA in common with this Morgan girl than she does with her half sister.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, I'm trying to be a good listener. I'm probably doing a pretty poor job, but privately I'm thinking what the? So I'm opening, my laptop and nodding, yeah. Wow, it's crazy, right?
Oh
and and then I look and I'm like, yeah, Morgan and I have, I don't have the exact number, but I want to say it was like 1530 something centimorgans in common. And I'm just like, oh shit. I don't know what I have landed on, but I know it's somebody's secret, and I'm about to mess this up for someone.
Yeah.
So that night settles, but not easily. I reach back out to Morgan and tell her what I have essentially learned, and now I am not naive, or rather, I'm slightly less naive. In the scope of everything you're going to see.
The veil is slowly being pulled back now.
Yes,
There's a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. So she, to her credit, and this is what we were just talking about, basically made sure that we could get on the phone, and she qualified everything she was about to say. She's like, I need you to understand that I am not trying to bring harm to you or to your family or to anybody, but I
love you, Morgan. I love you so much.
She's woven, you can't see it on the video. She's woven right in there.
Yeah, she's just the best. Absolutely the best.
And thankfully, in fairness, for as great as she is, it was absolutely the right thing to do, because the next things that she suggested were very hard to consider.
Yeah.
And that was, she was like, look, I am convinced, as much as this is weird for you to think, that we are half siblings. And the scenarios in my mind are ones that are really uncomfortable for me to suggest. One is that perhaps your father was donating sperm without, your family's knowledge. The other is that your mother may have had an affair, or sought the help of a sperm donor without your father knowing that she had. And none of those scenarios felt like ones where I'm like, oh, well, this one's better.
None of these are good. None of these are...
None of them are good.
No.
So I'm terrified. I call my parents to tell them, an update on the information. And in transparency, I really don't remember that call well, but I know that it didn't provide a resolution for me. So Morgan and I decide to go a step further, and the sleuths that we were becoming discover GEDmatch. And it's a site for those of you who've not heard of it. I haven't been on it in a long time, but at the time, I knew that we could upload the raw data from any commercial DNA test, and it would show you, among other things, but it would show you other matches to people from other sites. And we upload our information. We go to bed that night, and it takes, at the time, a while to process. And then we wake up, and there's another match, a male who he's chosen to stay out of this, so I won't mention him. On my blog, I call him Thomas, so we'll call him Thomas.
Thomas. Okay, great.
Thomas is also from Rochester, New York. Thomas is also born within 11 months of me and Morgan, all three of us in that same window. And Thomas looks exactly like me. Morgan, and maybe it's, the gender thing or whatever, I hadn't actually met Morgan in person either. But
I knew you were Morgan's brother the moment I saw you.
When I saw her in person, I agree 100%. Pictures did not make it clear to me. When I met her, there was no question.
But when I met you, I knew you were Morgan's brother immediately. When I first time I met you, I was like, that's fucking Morgan's brother. But anyway,
it's a good feeling for me.
Yeah. You guys have the exact same eyes. And I was like, that's Morgan's brother.
Yeah. The same smile. Her beard is not, as full as mine, but I tease. But I knew that Thomas unequivocally looked very much like me in his pictures. So I call my parents again, and I tell them, I was like, look, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but I know I am going to find something out that is a secret that I don't want to find out on my own. And I don't know whose it is. I don't know what it is, but I'm telling you that I'm going to find out. And I didn't say that to threaten them, other than
that's just a reality of what's going on. It was
just a reality of the situation.
Yeah.
And I promise I'm not going to break down every part of this conversation into such minute detail, but this was, for me, the biggest.
No, this is incredible to hear.
Thank you. I'm leaving the boxing gym the following night, and I get a text message from my father, which is a monumental occasion. My father will do this never. And I'm also not naive to all of the conversations that we've just, been having over the past couple of days in particular. And he says, I look at my phone, it says, text me when you're home. And I'm like, nope, that's not happening.
Oh my God.
I'm, 10 steps away from my car. I get in, hook up the Bluetooth or whatever, fire up the air conditioning, and I call him, and he was like, hey, are you home? Nope, I am not. And I'm not waiting until I'm home. I know that you are going to tell me something, and I'm not waiting. Tell me. And
love it.
What's wild about this is I know that I am about to find something that is probably very significant. I have a couple of scenarios in my mind about what they could be. And as I mentioned before, none of them are less significant than the next. And
my finding out that I was donor conceived was not as dramatic as yours in the least bit, but it was also my father who told me. And I will say, I, at 14, knew my dad was going to share something big with me. There was a change in his tone of voice where I was like,
yeah,
something's going to have to happen. What the fuck is this shit?
It's so weird, and
you feel the universe shift or something. I don't know what it is, but you do feel
exactly it.
Yeah.
So I'm about to pay tribute to that, because so he starts telling me things that I already knew, as I've already shared. Well, you know that your mom and I struggled for 5 years, starting a family. We tried, we tried everything, and in the end, my sperm count was too low, and we just sewed. And at this point, he's already, cracking. And I know there's this, exactly what you're alluding to, this moment where I'm just like, oh my God, you so desperately wanted to open this door, and guess what? You can't close it now. I just knew that it was going to come pouring out. And he said, we needed a sperm donor, David. I'm sorry, honey, but you're not my biological son. And of all of the things that have happened in, from then into the years since, that remains the most significant event for me in all of this, because I was, I think 2 days from then I was turning 33 or something like that. It was just the last thing that you count on, right? This is the type of thing that happens to someone on a TV show.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen to, if you're out there listening and you don't have this sort of experience, congratulations, by the way. So it ends up being this big waterworks, emotional waterboarding, on that conversation. And
Yeah.
for context, my father, and you're seeing parts of my personality here. Maybe we'll get some more of them, but I'm historically an outgoing person, conversational, energetic, all these things. And my dad is not that man. He's very quiet and reserved and not super animated. And I had heard my father cry one other time in my life. And I was in a car accident my sophomore year of college, that was a life and death situation. And I'm here. So spoiler, I did
You
live.
did make it.
I did make it. But I remember my father coming into the hospital room when I was having emergency surgery, and he grabbed my open hand and he lost it. And I did too. And I'm getting misty just remembering that. But I had never heard this. He was just a sobbing, heaping mess. And the only mercy that was granted to me in that moment was that I wasn't physically there, because I don't know how I would have, reacted or felt. Which is more, again, I know this is just like my emotional experience with it, but the juicy details then become, okay, we hang up the phone. How long we were on the phone, I have no idea. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been, 2 days. But I know that I hadn't made it home yet. My boxing gym was in downtown Miami. I was crossing a bridge to go to Miami Beach, where I lived at the time. And I remember hanging up the phone while I was crossing that bridge, and only then realizing, oh my God, Morgan's my sister. Like, oh my God. And she probably knows that, but she probably definitely does not know how or why. So if you've ever been in that situation where you have to, call someone and tell them you're related to them, that's a weird one.
Yeah.
And that's my knowledge. I don't have any books on it, but maybe we can write one.
We're gonna need it, given how many donor-conceived people are finding each other now. I've had to be the one to. I've sent. Oh my gosh! I've sent two messages to two siblings, going, "Hey," and it already had it on 23andMe. It already labeled half brother, half sister, and there was enough DNA shared that it was like we're half siblings.
There's no question.
There's no question. My half brother, who has not messaged me back yet. Him and I, we look like twins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
How long ago did you message him, out of curiosity?
Messaged him in November. So
so it's not like a few days ago. This is a while.
This has been over half a year. And his two kids look like our other siblings. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't become less disorienting. You would think that it does, and it doesn't. Well, to fast forward, I guess. So it's really funny because I've just described like a very dramatic, cinematic, at least in my mind, type of scene. And then it reaches a very anticlimactic moment where I was like, wait, I can't go home. I have to get toothpaste. so I stop at the Publix grocery store.
Perfect. That's the Spielberg shot. You just found out this life-altering information, and now the next shot is you in a CVS trying to decide toothpaste. Is it Colgate or Crest?
I'm a Colgate guy. I get or actually, I always get so confused. I hope the Colgate folks aren't mad at me if I'm wrong about that.
I'm a Hello girl. I do the natural Hello toothpaste. That's what I do. Okay, so you're buying toothpaste now. You've realized that Morgan is your half sibling, and now what?
So I call her and I'm trying to think of like, how do I lead us up to this? But I'm just like, I feel like pretense is useless. Like, we've already had weird conversations. So I call her and, I'm a sobbing mess, one moment, and I call her the next, and I'm like, you're my half sister. I don't know what to say. And we just like have this like really nervous laugh cry together. Now, mind you, I don't know where Morgan was. I presume she was at home. I am in the middle of the grocery store having a conversation. I'm sure other people can hear, probably saying, what the hell
Hallmark movie is this?
Yeah, exactly. And mind you, Miami Beach, for those of you who have not been there, is not a lot of the things that people tell you it is. It's also still a lot of the things people tell you it is. There are some weird characters out there, and I'm sure that I seemed like I was one of them that night. In fact, I was one of them that night, sharing this information, in the toothpaste aisle at Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. And I share that information with her, and it's sort of anticlimactic. I obviously explained the context of how we're connected, which I know I've been talking about all the bad scenarios. This was actually one I had not considered that was frankly better than the alternatives. Mom didn't have an affair. Dad didn't, step out. Like, okay, like in a lot of ways, as shocked as I was, as emotional as this was, I knew that nothing in my family had changed, that the people who were foundational to me in my nuclear family were not being taken from me. And that was something for me to hang on to when it was not easy to kind of keep myself together over the first few days. And then from there, it was a really emotional few days. As I mentioned, my sister, Sarah, the one that I was raised with, didn't know. And my parents wanted to tell her in person that she too was donor conceived. They wanted to do it in person. They told me that if they had tried to tell me in person, it would have seemed highly suspicious for them to fly down at the last minute and just, say, hey, we're just in town for a visit. So, they told me over the phone, but they wanted to wait. I found out on a Wednesday. They wanted to tell my sister in person after she got out of work on a Friday. Those 2 days were the longest 48 hours of my entire life. My sister, Sarah, and I are,
oh my God,
I'm obsessed with this child. Who's a young woman with 2 children. She thankfully took it, really well and called me, after my parents left. And I think that's the first time I felt like I could breathe since it had all happened.
Are you two part of the same pod?
We don't know. And I suspect if it's up to her, we will never know.
Okay.
Which is to say, my sister, to her credit, has landed on what I hoped I would have landed on, which is to say, okay, this is interesting information, but my family is my family, and I don't need to know more. I didn't have that luxury because in hindsight, I realized I was just, stumbling like a bull in a china shop, unaware of what I was, actually getting into. But the reality is, even if I had some semblance of a backstory, I think I was going to go find out anyway. And
I will say, as much as I totally respect that choice that your sister is making, I do. But there is a but. Finding out who your siblings are, finding out essentially a little bit more of your genetic makeup is life-saving information, not just for you, but for your kids. And finding that information out doesn't change who your family is. It does not change your the identity in which you choose to take on. And the reason I say this is donor-conceived people have run into massive life-threatening health conditions when they don't know their genetic history, real genetic history. And not just them, their kids have ended up in the hospital as well. So as much as I respect what your sister is choosing, I will say that for any donor-conceived person who is listening to this and really identifying with your sister with that, I would urge you don't have to go meet your siblings. You do not have to go meet your donor. You don't have to do any of that. But I do encourage you, just please find out what your medical history is for your sake and your kids. I would encourage that tremendously. So that's the end of my little TED Talk right there.
No, I will grant you that. And I think, and this isn't to downplay her decision, but I think she's been fortunate in the sense that we do have my mom's side of the family history, and there has not been, any recurring health issues for her that have been a concern. I want to say, I don't know for sure that her and her husband may have done genetic testing prior to having children. I know that my wife and I did, but even so, that's an important piece, but that's not the only piece. Medical history fills in a lot of those gaps where genetics don't tell the whole story, which is an interesting thing to say on this a podcast like this. nature is going to, provide some context for the health issues that you develop as well.
You can't, even when you, and this is something that a lot of people do get very confused with. One, because let's say this right now, any commercial kind of DNA test like 23andMe is not a medical grade test. It is not reliable to get a medical history. It's not reliable to know genetically what you carry. Even if you go to a genetic counselor, though, which I do encourage, if you financially can, to all adoptees, donor-conceived people, NPEs. I absolutely encourage you to do that if it is financially viable. But even still, they can't tell you everything. You cannot test for everything. You can't do it. So having that oral medical history is again, it can be life-saving. And we've seen it. So, and I will be getting tested as well. I will be doing a full panel as well. But I also am very aware that there are just things that it will not hold. It will not tell me everything. It tells me some stuff, but not everything.
Right. No, it is, you're absolutely right. Her decision is her decision.
It's her decision.
But there are implications to not making a decision with that regard. So thank you. I'm glad that people listening are going to know that angle, which is, it's important to consider.
But okay, so your sister is told, I'm so glad that you only had to wait 48 hours, although I'm sure that 48 hours felt like 48 weeks. And then, because I know what the end of this story looks like for you.
I can pick up the pace here a little bit too.
No, but I wanted, so like what is going on now emotionally for you? Because like how are you feeling about this? And I know what the next chapter is. How do you get there?
Pretty quickly, weirdly enough. So the emotions for me are all purely related to just this disruption. I'm not even thinking about the donor. It's not even really kind of on my radar, although it explains some things for me, which I had written a note to my father the night he told me, and I tried to be a mixture of sentimental and lighthearted. And one of the things that I included was, I understand why I inherited your love for basketball, but not your jump shot. So there were like little things like that, and it's funny too. I mean, my father was 27 when I was born. I played varsity basketball my junior year of high school. Like I wasn't great, but I was good enough to be on the varsity team. And I was practicing, 5 days a week, like sweating. I was in shape. And my dad was a smoker who was 44 years old and would still come home from work and just destroy me and my friends. And it was humiliating because I'm like, what the hell, man? Like I'm out here putting in the work and you're just showing up, pack of smokes, in between breaks, and it doesn't matter. But jokes aside, the emotional, toll of it was significant. I didn't know what to do with that sort of information. The way I've explained it to people was as if it was like watching all of your childhood videos, of you as a kid growing up and stuff, and they're all the same, but they're shot from a different angle now. You're seeing, like off camera, for example, which is to say that nothing has changed, but something has changed, the perspective at a minimum. So I'm still wrestling with that, but in a lot of ways, I look at the discovery of Morgan and Thomas as like my silver lining, which is to say, this is not an objectively bad thing. You get to keep your family, and you get these two new people who at the time I didn't really know. But as it happened, I find this out in late September, I am going to officiate a wedding in New York City 2 weeks later. And as it happens, Thomas lives in Manhattan. So I sent him a message saying, hey, this is a lot all at once. Would you be interested in, in meeting up while I was there? And he was very gracious about that. He said, yeah, I would love to. Morgan, understands that we're trying to link up, and I did not include her. I just wasn't going to like throw her into that. I happened to already have a trip to New York planned. So, but she latched on to that trip, and I ended up flying to Rochester to connect with her instead. And like that experience is exactly what you would think of, with like long lost relatives seeing each other in the airport and the slow motion and the dramatic, soundtrack in the back or whatever, was me and Morgan having like a slow but fast and then like sprint walk toward each other in the Rochester airport. And
that is I mean, that's a tiny airport. So that's pretty.
Yeah. You can see there's only so many people coming down for a flight.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we had this big bear hug, and you said this already, which is like, that we're related. she hugs me and she pulls back and she just grabs my face, like my cheeks, and just like touching me. She's like, your face is on my face. Is what she said. I'll never forget her saying, your face is on my face. And I don't understand. And so we board this flight. We had actually asked like some strangers who were, mind you, this is like a 5 a.m. flight. This is early. We had asked some woman, sitting there probably who like hasn't even had her first cup of coffee, like, do you mind taking, like pictures of us? And just like, he's my brother. He's not, whatever, It was weird and disorienting. So we get on this like puddle jumper plane and we sit next to each other, and it's just like face to face is like this. Like you can't help it. You're that close.
Wow.
So I'm seeing her face, as we're making the flight into New York. Fast forward, we get to link up with Thomas at his place, and it's just those first conversations. It's a lot like a first date, which is like you want to be there, but you don't know what the expectations are, and you don't want to be rejected. And was sort of I think the mindset that we all had at the time. So what I didn't know was so Morgan and Thomas had both grown up knowing that they were donor conceived. I was in the tripod. I was unique in the sense that I had just found out 2 weeks ago. So they had more of an origin story to how they had gotten here. And this was the first time I had ever heard Dr. Morris Wortman's name, which was they had said, well, my mom had gone to Dr.
I don't know
Morris
if you
Wortman.
heard it, but in the background in my head I just heard bum bum bum. So you hear his name for the very first time.
Yeah, and it's it's inconsequential because in my mind and it's not like anybody's mentioning it. I'm sort of spoiling the way this story should be told.
It's like just casually hearing like, oh, who's Darth Vader? Okay.
Right, exactly. Like, okay, he's a character. I get it.
All right.
He was the fertility doctor who helped both of their mothers. And I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. Rochester, New York, not a small city, not a big city, moderate sized city. And there were, probably not a ton of fertility doctors. And then, oh, by the way, since we're all related, it would make sense that the same donor passed through, that doctor's office. So, okay, cool. This is his name. Somewhere in that weekend, I don't remember exactly when, we Google him because one of us or all of us were curious to see what he looked like. And it was unquestionable that we resembled him. But
okay, okay, all right. I will say though, not to be a dick or anything. You're I would say conventionally about 1,000 times more attractive than him. Like the guy's, I would say, asshole qualities really came pronounced in his features. Like I always joke that he kind of looks like the combination between like Dr. Evil and an eel.
You have said that, and it's with great regret that I could see that resemblance. I'm going to leave that one there a little bit, which is to say,
I just like I don't see the resemblance, but if you guys did, cool. But like,
I'll tell you where it is in me, which is I have crow's feet all there. I've had them probably since I was like 16. I have light eyes, and like him, I had no hair. But by the way, it's actually very relevant that we would say that, because those alone are not, like, there are a lot of guys who've lost their hair. There are a lot of people with blue eyes.
I'm married to one. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm married.
And
oh
you
my God.
David.
David, are you donor conceived? Shit. We did we did the ancestry test. We know he's not. But oh my God.
So we see the picture and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's interesting. But mind you, like in the scheme of things that I've just learned in 2 weeks, I'm not thinking that there's like another surprise in here. I'm just like, okay, well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't remember when. This is where things start to get a little fuzzy for me. At some other point, I ended up back in Rochester visiting my family. It was not immediate. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table mentioning to my my mother, well, both of my parents, but I was talking to my mother, that that we felt like Dr. Wartman resembled us, like as offspring. Like, oh wow, we kind of looked like him, you know. And my mother is not taking it as lighthearted as I have just articulated it. She like breaks neck and like looks over at my father. I'm like, what? And she was like, I have thought that I was a total lunatic at multiple times throughout your life, because I remember distinctly on several occasions looking at you and saying, oh my God, you look like him. And that was the first time that I considered, not because of,
Oh, it just
like
got
the
cold in
fact.
here. It just got very cold. Okay.
I will tell you what it was that stuck out to me about that was it was a mother's instinct.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the fact that we looked similar, because again, the rationalization behind that was just like there's a lot of light-eyed, bald people. Um, so, but her reaction to that was the first time that I think I considered, like, the mustard seed was planted, that this was actually maybe something.
Yeah.
And I'll gloss over some of like the in between. I will go on to say that the next year, almost a year, I'll lead us up into August of 2018, was increasingly better. It became a little bit more normal to, have this as a part of my story. And by then I had begun to develop like a real kinship with Morgan and Thomas in our own ways. And it was really special. In fact, August of 2018 is so important because I know that my father in particular was very reluctant to be involved in any of the fallout of, an extra family and stuff, for reasons that I understand, which was, I know in a lot of ways he felt like my sister and I would not see him as our father and that we might try to replace him in some ways. So he was resistant to the idea of me pursuing some of this, but it wasn't too close to him, so I guess he didn't have to face it front on. However, we had an opportunity where Thomas, Morgan, and I were all going to be in Rochester at the same time, and Thomas's mother, who had retired, was also going to be in Rochester. And so we started to like dream up this idea, like, what if we got our three families together for like a cookout or a barbecue?
Oh my God.
And we did. To this day, it was one of the most special nights of my entire life. It was
Oh
just
my
as if all of
God.
these fears and nerves that had been building over the years, um, for, well, years for them, certainly years for my parents, weeks, or months for me, were gone. Everybody was so warm and kind. Our moms all had unique reactions to seeing each of us as like a different,
Oh,
a choose your own
wow.
adventure book of their child. Like my mother had a
Yeah.
very visceral reaction to seeing Thomas, because she was like, I know you're not my son, but you are a part of my son. You
Yeah.
look like my son. That was, anyways, it's an amazing, incredible night. And the next morning, Thomas sends a text to me and Morgan and says, so I woke up to a new match on 23andMe.
Oh my
And I'm like, okay. And I don't know if Morgan was, busy, or if it was early enough. She was still sleeping. I don't recall. So Thomas and I are kind of going back and forth. We look this woman up, also from Rochester, born in 1985, as well. So in that same, one year window, basically. And Morgan eventually does join the group chat and sends what I recall like OMG in all caps, like multiple times. And I'm like, okay, maybe she's just being really dramatic. As it turns out, this woman was a very close childhood friend of hers who lived on the same street and had a twin sister who was her best friend all through childhood. And I can only imagine what Morgan felt that day, because
Yeah.
what I felt that day was so disorienting.
Yeah.
Um, it was as if like this thing that I had worked so hard, I thought I had put in a lot of work to be okay mentally and emotionally. And now I've got this like little bonus, family of like a year in, right? Like I have Morgan and Thomas, like my little tripod. And now there's an interloper, which is not literally how I felt about them. But that was like, oh my God. Um,
And it's
that,
I've not had this happen to me yet, but the the amount of donor conceived people who find out they went to school with their donor conceived sibling. They were next door neighbors, they were childhood best friends. Like it's a very common experience.
yeah.
And that is it's it just makes it you realize that how I'm trying to find the right words, but it's we're constantly told that like, oh, the siblings are everywhere, and you'll never like, the chances of like a sibling dating or something is so minimal. But then when you talk to donor conceived people and you realize how many encounters you've had with your siblings over your life and you just didn't know. It's
Yeah,
tremendous.
it is. And I'll gloss over some of the rest of it. So that was a disorienting night, but
Yeah.
I'll fast forward to sometime in the next 6 months when I actually joined that club that you're talking about. At this point, I had decided to opt out of new sibling discoveries. I just didn't have the emotional capacity for it.
Understand.
But of course, I was still receiving notifications and updates from people like Morgan, and sibling number 7, I think, was my middle school classmate. We
Oh
we
my
sat
God.
next we sat next to each other in Italian class and homeroom.
Oh my
And
God.
the irony here is that we both studied Italian because our fathers are Italian.
Oh my God.
Um,
Oh my
I
God.
yeah, of course I didn't know when I was in school with him that he was my half brother. The visual
Oh,
similarities were not as pronounced for me. Meaning, like, I didn't feel like an idiot for not noticing it at the time. It's not like we were in middle school and people were like, "You guys look the same." That didn't really happen, but that was also very disorienting for me. And it's around this
yeah.
time when the number swells to 8 to 10 to 11, and guess what? Everyone's born in this same time frame. Guess what? Everyone's mother went to the same fertility doctor, and guess what? We all kind of resemble him in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
This thing that seemed like a seedling of impossibility at some point started to feel entirely plausible. And this is where the timeline gets a little bit fuzzy for me, but well, actually, no, that's not entirely true. October of 2021, maybe, I started a blog, berrychronicles.com. I haven't updated it in a while, but if you want to check out some of it, I mentioned that only because someone had shared my blog with a writer from the New York Times, and that writer reached out to me. Her name is Jackie Miraz, and she asked me. Now, mind you, at this point on the blog, I'm sharing a lot of what I'm sharing right now without mentioning names, because if I'm wrong, that's a wild accusation, and I'm not trying to ruin somebody's life, well, period. But certainly not without context. And so the woman asked me, she's like, "Well, have you confirmed that this doctor is your biological father?" And I said, "Well, no. I love to find out, but I don't know how I'm going to find out. There's nobody else who's matching to me, who's closer to him than us half siblings are together." And she put in motion things that in hindsight started to happen really fast. And she introduced me to a DNA investigator. She's like the celebrity DNA genealogist or whatever. I forget her name. She kind of blew me off. Then I went back to Jackie, the writer, and she said, "Well, I'll put you in touch with Eve Wiley and DNA Angels."
Yeah,
So
Eve.
so this is where
Yes,
Eve
DNA angels.
enters.
Ah, we got some MVPs in the building
You're
now.
not kidding. And by the way,
Ah,
I was grateful at the time, but I didn't realize like the class that I was introduced to like right off the bat. And I'm not saying that just for for their sake to puff egos. Like, that group and that woman are just powerhouses. So
Yep.
anyways, Eve helps me a little bit. In fact, she might have been the one to connect me to DNA Angels, if I remember incorrectly. And be careful what you wish for. I wanted an answer, and within 2 days, I was given a path to one. I gave them access to my ancestry.com, login and everything, so they could go in and poke around, and information on Dr. Wortman to kind of also use birth records and stuff like that to maybe create a story. And they said, "Look, we can see that at least 5 generations ago, you are related to him, but there are so many missing gaps in between." And for additional context, he lost a lot of his family in the Holocaust. His parents were Holocaust survivors. And the long and short of it was, for us to be connected 5 generations ago was in fact not very unique. That they created so much ambiguity that it didn't necessarily mean much.
Yeah.
If I wanted to confirm once and for all, if my connection to him, then their recommended path was for me to contact one of his known daughters, a child that he had raised in his house, and get them to take a DNA test. And I'm thinking, I've got a snowball's chance in hell
Yeah.
picking up the phone and just calling one of them and saying, "Hey,
Hey,
hey, it's me, it's David. Do you want to take a DNA test? I'm a guy you've never heard of before.
what's up, random people?
What's up, folks?"
You want to take a DNA test? Let's spit in a
So
tube, everyone.
so credit again to the DNA angels because I don't know what it was, but they landed on three of Dr. Wortman's known children, daughters, adults, and they said this one in particular, we think you have the best chance at like getting a response from. And in fact, I'm not even entirely sure I know why they arrived at that.
Well, if I am correct, and this is where now I think that like I've had conversations about these moments, but it's because this daughter was no contact with Dr. Wortman, correct? Like,
so the answer is yes, but I did not know that at the time.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, and again, this is admittedly something I feel like a little
Don't know how the hell they knew
of.
that, but like,
Yeah, they seem to believe that something about her online presence made her warm and approachable. Which,
DNA
by the way,
angels are freaking. Oh,
you're not kidding.
oh my god.
I will also tell you in hindsight, they couldn't have been more right. And I call, her name is Ariel. I call Ariel and I'm at my sister. This is really weird how many times she comes into my story at pivotal moments. My sister-in-law is getting married, and I'm like, we're getting ready for the wedding, and I'm like, or for the rehearsal dinner. I was like, I'm just gonna call and leave this voicemail, and then we'll go and we'll see if she ever responds. Well, she answers.
Oh my god.
She answers the call, and I have not prepared a phone call. I have prepared a voicemail.
I love those moments where you're just like, I wasn't here for a real person.
Yeah,
No. Just hang up the phone. Let me do that. I can't handle actually this kind of pressure.
And I'm sweating, and
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be dressed nice and not sweating.
Yeah.
And this whole thing, I somehow managed, and she might disagree, but this is how I remember it. I play it very cool, very calm.
Ariel, we are open for comments if that was actually true. We would like to hear your interpretation perspective of what happened.
Privately, this was a quick, aggressive death on the inside. But I managed to tell her with confidence what I knew to be true. What I did not include in my conversation with her was what I suspected may also be true. So I told her what I also have just told you, which is I know that I am a genetic connection to your father at least 5 generations ago. I am donor conceived. I do not know who my biological father is. I'm not trying to find a relationship with him. I'm just trying to find out who he is. And I believe that if you were to take a DNA test, I could confirm who it is. And she agreed, like while we're on the call. And this is the worst negotiation tactic on my part. When someone says yes in a negotiation, you shut up. You stop talking. You won. I say, okay, well, I don't want you to feel rushed, and you don't have to if you don't want to, and you can take your time to sleep on it or whatever. And she's like, okay, well, yeah, I'll do that. And I'm like, you idiot. So whatever. So we hang up. And my wife is there. She's on speaker the whole time, and she's just like, oh my God, like what the hell just happened? We finished getting dressed, and then I get a text message from her. I don't remember exactly where, but I know that the wedding was in the way. The wedding rehearsal was in the way. And on your iMessage, like you'll see the text, and then like whatever else is cut off underneath it, you got to open it. What I see is, so I found your blog, ... And I'm thinking, oh shit.
Oh no.
Like she's gonna see what I'm ultimately after and tell me to pound sand. Like I'm not trying to talk to you, guy.
Okay.
I open the text, and to this day is in a stream of stories that are filled with shocks. This was a shock. Was I am almost confident I know who your biological father is. Let me know when you're free to talk. And
Shut up.
Oh my God. I'm still like I'm having chills just telling you about something that happened to me 2 years ago. It was that.
Oh my God.
Unexpected. Now, mind you, I know for sure at this point I am at the rehearsal dinner. I can't do anything about this. We're partying, we're doing our thing, and I want to say it was going to be at least 3 hours before I was going to be able to get back in front of a screen.
That's 3 centuries at this point.
It is eternity.
Yes.
So we agree to FaceTime the second time around. The first time it was just on a call. We agreed to FaceTime, and I set my iPhone up, like here on the table, and I sit down at the desk in the hotel room, and her face appears, and it looks really familiar. And
is it your face, as Morgan would say, your face is on my face.
I'm reasonably fair skinned or medium toned. I think the biggest difference is Ariel is more fair skinned, than I am. But otherwise, yeah, that's my face.
Oh my God.
We both have this like nervous kind of smirky smile as this begins. And it's hilarious, right? Because this is not small information. This isn't it's not even kind of funny. And it's smirking.
Not, and I just want everybody to know that I'm sorry that I am laughing. This is just like,
oh no.
Oh my God. No, this is just insanity.
I'm saying it because I'm having the same reaction. I'm like, I shouldn't be laughing, but I can't help myself.
Oh, so, this is TV show series. Like, anybody writing this would be like, yo, this is a little intense. Like, this couldn't, like, let's ground this a little bit more in reality.
Why don't we stick to nonfiction, okay, Mr. Fiction? I have felt that way at times.
All right, Tolkien, like, shut up. Like,
Right, exactly. So she starts talking, and she starts telling me, little anecdotes of, and this is the conversation where I learned several minutes into it that she had not had a relationship with him for, at the time, maybe 15, 16 years, maybe a little bit longer.
Oh my God, that long.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, I'll clarify. I know that they had contact sometimes, but very sparingly, and not to the point where she would call it, an active relationship.
So it was essentially no contact, only.
Correct.
Essentially, yeah.
Correct. Now, on that call, we didn't get into a ton of detail in terms of why that was the case. As we started, as she started to share some things with me, I think I had context for it, but I wasn't going to guess, and it didn't feel appropriate to pry.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I felt that part of the reason I was getting the information I was getting is because there wasn't a relationship to speak of for her. And that's not a judgment. I just know it's probably easier to have a conversation like this when you're not going to go see that, that person the next day, for example. But she starts to lay out for me this, story filled with little anecdotes, and I'm paraphrasing what she said. I wish I had it like word for word. But one of the first things she said was, I've always had questions or misgivings, like, in my mind about, things my father, did or may have done, as a physician. And when I saw your blog and I started reading it, I immediately knew that this was true. And
oh my God.
And then so she goes on and, she continues to explain some context. I had found news clippings in I think it was his home office or something, in a file or a box or something, that had, like clippings of kids, in Rochester. And she had recalled asking him at one point, who are these kids? And, he explained, well, these are, children of families that I have helped, over the years, which objectively could be true. But she latched on. Laura, CPR. David.
Oh my God, that's like a serial killer. Oh my God.
I'm really thankful to say murder wasn't a part of that equation, because it's the only thing that would have made that harder to swallow.
Yeah. I mean, we are. Okay. I'm waiting now for like the bunker that has the map of all of your photos with the red yarn. Okay.
I don't know if that exists. I'm really hopeful it doesn't.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. All right. Keep going. This nightmare story. Yeah. No, it's all good. It's not bad. Okay. So she found a box of.
Yeah. So one of the things I remember about that, and I just want to be clear, I may be misremembering some of the details on this, and so I say that just for everybody's protection. But I believe she had recalled seeing one or maybe two of the siblings from our group who were there in that folder more than once, which indicated to her at the time, this maybe somebody who just showed up in the news a lot. But with my blog had maybe implied to her that there was a reason that it was these ones showing up multiple times. And when she saw my blog is when it clicked for her that she believed with no uncertainty in her mind that these were offspring of his that he had been keeping track of, to the extent that, that he knew how. And what's really funny about this is I don't remember exactly how long we spoke. Let's call it 20, 30 minutes, not a short period of time. Um, she had not actually said what I thought I needed like to hear her say. And I was like, before we end this call, because we were winding down, I was like, I just need to hear you say, like, you're dancing around it, but like, can you tell me what you actually think this means? And she was like, I think that my father is your biological father. Yeah. And it's similar to, how I had mentioned before, that mother's instinct, that first time my mom sort of, snapped neck when I had mentioned it. I I knew in my heart that it was true. After that conversation, I
Yeah.
was, I don't want to say confident, but I was feeling like, man, if it's not this, then I've really missed the mark, and I feel terrible
Yeah.
for even suggesting or thinking that this was possible. But I had very little doubt in my mind when I ended that phone call with her, because she didn't have any incentive, and to this day, she has no incentive to have done what she did, to help me, to help the scores of the rest of us who were all going to be impacted by this information.
Oh
People,
my God.
and I would just say anecdotally, like I've had people tell me, in the years that I've, gone through this, if, from my blog to, being in Capitol Hill and stuff like that, you're courageous, you're brave, like you're handling it with so much grace. And I'm grateful for that. I truly am. Because it has not been easy work to get to a place where I'm okay. But when I think of courage, what I have done pales in comparison to what Ariel did in my estimation.
Ariel, if you are hearing this, I have the most utmost respect for you as an individual. I cannot begin to imagine the emotional just strife that was going on inside of you, inside of her. I cannot imagine. Um, what she did was incredibly brave.
Yeah.
And even though this entire journey has led to a very, I would say, tumultuous time, it needed to happen. This needed to be uncovered. There are so many children of the doctors who commit fertility fraud who just literally actively help protect their dads, which I understand the instinct. I get it. That's your dad. I understand. But the that person committed a very horrific act,
On a
and
repeated basis.
on a
Yeah.
repeated basis, and this needs to be brought to light. It needs to be brought to justice. There are people who need information, and the fact that the fact that she was willing to stand up in a way in that kind of that
She
is a
put her
unique.
she put a target on herself,
Yeah,
like
she did.
me as the hypothetically donor conceived person. I'm not really a major player, for for Dr. Wartman. And I don't say that in a faux act of humility. I'm not. But that's his daughter. That's the daughter that he raised, regardless of the relationship that they did or did not have at the time. She she put herself square in the center of this, and she did not have to. And I I just remember feeling like a numbness and
Yeah.
hanging up with her, that like I had been handled by somebody. So not only did she agree to do this, but like it was almost as if she was like counseling me. And there was just like a warmth to her that I thought, like, who the hell are you? Like, to this day, I don't think I've met anybody like Ariel. And so she
Ariel,
agrees.
cheers to you, girl. Like, way to step up. Like, I thank
I
you.
love you, Dolly. I
Yeah.
love you a
Oh
lot.
my God.
So
Okay. Wow.
yeah. So
Okay.
this is a okay. I promise I'm not trying to overdo this with like dramatic moments, but here comes another one. Um, I don't know if it was that same phone conversation or if it was one, maybe a day or so later, but we had, discussed like reaffirming that I had what I had originally told her, which is my desire. I don't want a relationship, whether it was him or if it was, Joe down the street. I am not looking for a relationship with my biological father,
Mhm.
but I am looking to fill in the pieces. I want to know. I want to know what they look like. I'd like to know their medical history, which we've talked importantly about
A
here.
little important
Um,
there, yeah.
a little important, and then motivations. What let's operate on two sides of this. One, if it's an anonymous donor, what is your life like now? What were your circumstances where you were donating, apparently prolifically for a period of time? Like, what is your life like? On the flip side, if it's Dr. Wortman, my question about motivations are quite different.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I explained, all of this in context to her, and she again offers advice to me that she does not need to, which is that I should contact him, that I should reach out to him. And which is hilarious, right? Because I'm literally talking about this thing that is accessible to me. In fact, over the course of, the several years leading up to that, I could have called him anytime, and I just chose not to. But now I was in a very unique situation where she was taking the test. In fact, I think by the time we had this conversation, she had already mailed it in.
Wow.
I went out of my way to next day, the official, not like ancestry.com, but like the one that the federal government will acknowledge in like a paternity suit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to send to her. And so it's in the mail from her sending back to the lab. And so in my mind, I'm like, this is actually a perfect time to reach him, because if I didn't have this information, then I could call and ask. And if he told me, you're a lunatic, or leave me alone, don't ever call me again, I'm no closer to an explanation. But if I believe that I'm about to get confirmation, then I can say and hear anything that I want, because regardless of what he tells me, I know I'm going to get that answer with or without his assistance.
Absolutely.
So this next part of the story is what is, and in fact, it ties in the very beginning of our conversation, which is my reaction to his death is a lot like it is in life, which is my feelings about him are ambivalent, because there are some things that I'm grateful for, and there are some things that I can't forgive. I was 2 weeks, well, I didn't know it was 2 weeks to the day at the time, but it ended up being 2 weeks to the day before my wife gave birth to our first son, our first child, my son. And as it happens, so I'd mentioned that Jessie, my wife, is adopted. The thing I'm leaving out is that she was raised Jewish. I happen to be expertly Jewish, apparently, in my DNA, but I was not raised Jewish. But our son was going to be raised, and I hate that this quote or term was also stolen by that idiot Republican member of the House, George Santos, who had said that he was Jewish. But I think that was an accurate representation of how we were going to be raising our son, which was I wanted him to have the cultural experiences that mattered so much to my wife. And at the same time, whether I've invited them there or not, they were part of my genetic heritage, and they were going to be a part of my son's genetic heritage. So Ariel helps me conceive of a way to contact him with something that would be reasonable to ask for, which is practical advice from an outspoken member of the Jewish community in Rochester, for practical advice on fathering a Jewish son. Ooh. So I send this email, and I go to the gym. I'm thinking this is gonna go nowhere. And 30 minutes later, my phone rings with a 585 area code number on my phone.
Oh my God!
Did I not tell you this? If I didn't tell you, man.
You didn't tell me this! I'm fine!
I am so sorry. So the heart rate starts.
For anyone who doesn't know, 585 is a Rochester phone number. So I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, it has to be like if there's another 585 number in my phone, I already have it saved.
Yeah.
So, and I'm, lifting weights, trying to bro it out. And I just like kind of step away, and I'm like, hello, this is David. And he's like, hi, David, this is Dr. Morris Wortman. I received your email. And I about shit myself, like I just couldn't believe that he had responded, and he had actually taken it upon himself to call. I sent him an email. I gave him my phone number in it, but I didn't think he would call me. So I step away. Thankfully, my gym at the time had like a room behind the men's locker room that was for stretches and stuff like that. Nobody was in there. And I just put it on speaker, and I opened my phone to the notes app, and I'm just typing in. Yep. So, but the first 30 seconds of this call are substantial, because his first question, not meant, sent to me as like an accusation, is, how did you get my information again? Like how did you hear about me? And I explained so if I was a bumbling mess with Ariel and trying to hide it, this one I actually felt like I handled as well as I possibly could have given the circumstances. And I very slowly draw out the situation, which is I learned your name a few years ago, when I learned, from my parents that I was conceived through a sperm donor. As it turns out, you were my mother's fertility doctor. And at the time, I discovered, two half siblings whose mothers actually also used you as their fertility doctor. But over the course of the next couple of years, that number swelled to, and I don't remember what the number would have been at the time, but let's call it 11, 12, something to that effect. And that we, laughed about the fact that, when the numbers were a little bit smaller, that we looked similar to you. And that became harder for us to just kind of write off as a joke when the numbers continued to grow. And what I'm about to suggest next might sound like a wild accusation, and you have my permission and blessing to end the phone call, if you desire. But I think you're my biological father. And like the sound of silence, like the second I finished that sentence, was like suffocating to me. And it couldn't have been more than, a second, for, waiting for a reply. But he said, well, I understand. And at this point, I think I had told him when I was born as well, and saying, look, in the early 80s, we didn't really have great record keeping. Like we worked with the donors that we had when we had them, and there were no electronic, medical records like there are now, obviously, that sort of stuff. He's like, look, there were a lot of, Ashkenazi Jewish doctors at the University of Rochester at that time, as who might share the features that, that you're discovering. He's like, so I'm, it's not me. And then, or some, or maybe I actually, in fact, no, that's not what he said. He didn't say it's not me. He said that, I wish you, the best of luck in trying to, find that information out. Pause. Immediately, I am thinking to myself, if someone just called me, if I was a fertility doctor and someone had just called me and said, I think you could be my biological father, I would say, well, that's impossible because I never used my sperm on my patients.
Yeah, that would sort of be the first thing out of my mouth, going, I'm no, that unless somebody took it without my knowledge, which would, no.
You would know if someone was taking it.
Yeah, that's a very easy no. If that wasn't you, that's a very roundabout answer of going,
exactly. It's like those, what was the cartoon Peanuts, when like the teacher's talking and it's all this, rah, rah, rah. That's probably exactly what was going on there. So in that moment, I have a decision to make, which I've already alluded to, which is, what am I here for? Do I want to push back and tell him, well, guess what? I'm going to find out in a couple of weeks anyway. Or do I want to have the conversation that I am hoping to have? I know I'm not going to get a confession. Obviously, that's already missed. But I am hoping for information that I think I can form a rationalization or a story out of. And so we go on to have a half-hour conversation about a number of things. One, a centerpiece of that being what I had reached out to him about, which was this Jewish identity. And the irony of this is, yes, I was trying to bait him into a response or a confirmation. But what I, intentionally or not, what I'd reached out to him for was a genuine area of concern for me. I, to this day, still feel like an imposter when I tell people that I am Jewish, because it's not the same as, the story I said before where, oh, I'm Irish. Oh, no, I'm Italian. Cool, I can have better pasta, or I can go have potatoes, right? And you can make lighthearted jokes about that. No, you discover that you're Jewish. This is a completely different animal. I am, in a very literal sense, the descendant of Holocaust survivors and many others who did not. I will never feel like that is a part of my experience. It would be egregious for me to think that that is a part of my lived experience, even though I can't deny, obviously, that there are ancestral elements to that, and depending on inherited trauma through our DNA and stuff,
the complexity of finding out that you are Jewish, as it is an ethno-religion, is something that's very complex for a lot of donor conceived people. I am also 50% Ashkenazi Jewish genetically. And so it's been an ongoing discussion and with a lot of friends, because I have a ton of friends who are Jewish. And there are some friends who are like, no, Laura, you're identify as fucking Jewish. Like, you're Jewish. And then I have other friends who are like, no, you're not. Yes, technically there is, but it is wrong of you. Like, and it's a complex thing.
And it's so hard to hear that too, because on one token, you're like, I'm not trying to adopt something that's not mine.
I've always said it feels like I forever live in a house in which I am always a guest in. Like I'm forever a guest. I don't ever get to live in this house that I do permanently live in, but I'm never a resident. I will always be a renter. And that's been hard. And it is something that I wrestle with a lot. And, anyway.
So I have this opportunity to just kind of listen. And like I said, get what I came for. So as I'm trying to furiously, put down notes in my, like the notes app on my phone. But anyways, we talk about Jewish identity and his experience with it, and I should actually have the notes open here to kind of like reference it, but I can paraphrase. But he had told me that a lot of his experience in Judaism, like he wasn't always a devout Jew, that wasn't always central to his life until his own parents had either passed away or were much older. I forget, maybe it was a mixture of the two. And he, really took to the faith and gave me a couple of things that were anecdotes that I frankly still kind of hold on to. And one of those was, if I have this apprehension, and in fact, it's very relevant to what you and I were literally just talking about, this apprehension, this uncertainty, that the Jewish faith in his experience is the one that is most open to people who actively have a respect and admiration for the faith, for the experience, and wanting to approach it respectfully, that he acknowledges, like, in that sense, that is, you are Jewish. Like, the people who see you pursuing this earnestly, out of respect for them and their experience, would, in my experience, would be inviting and accepting of you, and that's, if that's an identity that you believe is central to who you want to be, whether it's today or sometime in the future, to pursue that. But that you do not need to feel as if you are not a part of that. Essentially sort of saying, like, your mindset, which is reinforcing, I guess, what we were saying, is the most important part. And he told me, a lot about that. In fact, he told me through that, about it through the lens of, raising my son, and not feeling, especially because I was going to be raising my son, that, like, what a great thing, part of a Jewish community to give that gift to your son, even if it's not something that you had the experience with, that there can be authenticity in that, and his experience can be real to him. And I think, in a lot of ways, these are things that maybe I thought I knew, but I felt very validated by, in that moment, especially on the precipice of knowing, like, my wife's belly was big. So he was really going to be there soon. So it wasn't just like hypothetical, like he was really going to be here. He told me a lot about, his family history too, in a way that I thought was a little bit more revealing than I personally would have disclosed. But again, I'm thinking in my mind, okay, he's not going to come out and tell me.
He's going to tell you in a way that he feels safe telling you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the version of the story that he wants to weave. So at the end, he, if you give me a second, actually, I'm going to look it up on my phone, but there was a saying, that he shared with me. I can't find it, but it was basically go from strength to strength was the English equivalent to it, sort of a Jewish blessing. And when we hung up, I actually started the conversation and felt terrified. End of the conversation felt sort of really even. I felt sort of at peace, because number one, I suspected, I was very confident that I would never talk to him again. That there was no reason for me to, that was all of what I had believed. And number two was that I didn't think that I was ever going to get a better explanation than the one I had received, which is to say, even, and this does kind of bring us full circle to, questions about like, how do I feel in the aftermath? And the answer is still ambivalent, because I I don't think I was ever going to get the answer that I wanted. I don't think I was ever going to get someone acknowledging what I did was wrong, or yes, I did do this. This was, or it was wrong, but this is why I thought it was right, or I'm sorry. That conversation made me think that that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
That he was rationalizing his decisions, in his mind. And what I took from it is my motivations were to help. He, and this was context I had gotten from Ariel, that he was a very dedicated physician, was the words that she used. He really did want to get outcomes. Now, whether they were for himself or for his patients or a mixture of those two, that's where life is interesting.
So we may have had I mean, obviously neither of us are psychiatrists, but it does sound like potentially there definitely was some God complex there.
I believe that. Yeah, that ego would play a role, which is to say, now how I arrived there, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do I believe that he was, genuinely trying to help, his patients? The answer is yes, because at one point I know that several of our mothers, it wasn't as if they went in once. He did this once and then, the babies were born. No, my parents tried for years through frozen donations and others. So it wasn't his first option, but at some point it became one that he was more increasingly comfortable with. And I wrestle with that, because that, to me, I'm not justifying it. I'm saying, oh, well, because it wasn't his first option, it makes it okay. No. But I don't think that was his first instinct. I think his first instinct was to try the paths that he could to get an outcome for himself or his patients. And then, in the absence of others, took matters into his own hand.
Literally.
But it's still not something that I am not in a position to decide who should or should not forgive. But I can say with certainty two things. People are like, and I'm sure this is happening all the time on your episode, comments and stuff like that, or even on Instagram comments. Who cares? She got what she wanted. It's a doctor. Like, what are you so upset about? You're here. Got it. Like, trust me, any basic person with a brain can arrive at some of those thoughts.
Yeah.
However, if this was really okay, then why did the doctor at a minimum not disclose it as an option? Why did none of them disclose it as an option?
Yeah.
Of all of the doctors that I'm aware of in our country, and maybe certainly others, who are guilty of fertility fraud at their own hands, sorry, I couldn't help myself. Why did none of them offer it as an option to their patients if it was such not a big deal? If disclosure didn't matter, if it was a viable option, if it was okay? Because it wasn't, and they knew it was't. Whether it was a gray area.
And even when confronted, why didn't they go, oh yeah, no, that was totally me. Yeah, I absolutely did that. You're welcome.
Right.
Why didn't they say, because they knew it was wrong. They knew it was wrong. They knew that they were taking consent out of the equation. They also know that this is it's inappropriate as your doctor to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
To be implanting you with your own doctor's sperm. They know that that is absolutely inappropriate. Now, whether or not the law says it is an entirely different conversation, but they know ethically it is incorrect.
Yeah. And the law is as good as the information that people have to make it. Never mind all of the bullshit that goes on in our government. But a lot of the members of Congress that we've spoken to, and Laura, you were there with us, acknowledge, like, technology moves faster than government, moves faster than a lot of things. So I don't fault states for not having those laws on the books to begin with, but I do fault them for not doing something about it once they are aware of how widespread this is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can fully understand why so many politicians and people are like, why the fuck should we have a law about this? This should be like, wouldn't this be covered by 10 different other things? Wouldn't this be covered by fraud? Wouldn't this be covered literally by almost anything else? And the fact that it happens so actively much, it does seem comically evil that this is such a common occurrence. For anybody, and what I mean by common is, as David has said, it's about like 15-17% of the United States population who has taken a commercial DNA test. And even with that small percentage, we have now found 70 doctors in the United States who have committed fertility fraud. Now, fertility fraud has been committed in other countries as well. We're just talking about the United States. That is a lot. That's a lot of doctors. 70 we have already found.
Yeah. And that's to that point that we have found.
We know that there's more. I mean, I already know that there's more. They just haven't reported it because I've talked to those donor-conceived people going like, yeah, I know. I just don't know what to do with this information yet. I don't know what to do. Right. I know there's more. There are more. But, oh, my God. Okay, so... Yeah. And now we go into the next part. Now I believe we go into the next chapter, which is where things start getting kind of really extra spicy.
They do indeed. This is going to sound terrible. However, I'm already over on the time that I had booked.
Oh my God, it's okay. I tell you what, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a second episode because we're already easily at an hour and a half.
Oh, that's a lot. Okay.
That's a lot.
Oh, so I get a part 2?
You're gonna be my first part 2. That's what we're gonna do. So everybody,
we're just told me to shut the fuck up at some point. I just kept jabber.
Because this is all incredible information. So we're going to do a part 2. And that's what we're going to do. So everybody, you hang on to your hats because now I'm a little bit more aware of what happened in part 2. And I can tell you, it gets spicy and juicy and terrifying. So we're going to have a part 2 to this. So you and I will schedule that. You're going to go do your shit. And everybody come back for a part 2. And David, thank you so much for everything that you have shared so far. This is all a lot of stuff that actually I didn't know as well as I thought I knew your guys' story. Lots of stuff I didn't know. And yeah, we'll be back. We're going to be to continue on this. And I do feel like this story in particular, it deserves 2 parts. I'm sorry. It ends with a plane crash. It has earned 2 parts. Like we all know where this is heading.
Well, I appreciate that, and I want to say too because I know we will come back, but thank you for doing this. And there are a lot of people who care about these subjects, and I don't know a lot of people who are approaching it with the same even-handedness and research. The amount of time that you've put in to be the subject matter expert on this, and you can bring levity to something so serious and handle it when it needs to be serious too. I'm very, very grateful for you. And for the people who listen to you and the platform that you have. Like, you don't have to do this. And
oh no, I have to do this. That I have to. There's no way. There's
the compulsion. I understand the compulsion. No. But what I will, the last part of that though, is because of you, there are so many people who have called their legislators, who have gotten legislative co-sponsors in multiple states and at the federal level. You have done that, and I'm really grateful for you.
Thank you. But to me, it's a team effort. Literally talking to another donor-conceived person yesterday about how complex this whole world is, and thank God we're all taking on a different task. We've got the fact that Eve Wiley is our fertility fraud expert. Thank God we need one person to just fucking cover fertility fraud. Then we have other donor-conceived people who are covering different aspects. We have, the fact that we had you and you, Jacoba, Maya, all of our Carrie, all of our amazing fertility fraud group who are brave enough to come forward. The fact that you guys were willing to take 2 days to go lobby and explain your story over and over and over and over again to different congressmen and congressmen's aides. We needed that. We need that. And the fact that we have donor-conceived people who are willing to fly all over the country in order to tell the story that needs to be told. Thank God all of us are coming together. We're all of us together are making this work. And I look at it as my job is communication and outreach. That's going to be my job. But there's no way I could do goddamn Eve's job. Eve is what Eve, Jacoba, Jillian, all of these amazing people. Everybody, we're handling this all. We're all taking different parts, and everybody is needed. And I'm so grateful that our community is actively going, what can I do? What is my job? What can I do to help?
It's an awesome feeling. Well, you've said it again. I don't need to beat you over the head with my gratitude. So I'll ease off the gas, but I look forward to part 2. I hope they do too.
And I am, and also I am very grateful that you and Morgan and all of your siblings are coming forward, because one pod coming forward can make a difference. And the fact that all of you guys are coming forward is, again, it's going to change the history. It's going to change our history, and we need it.
I can't wait.
Thank you. We need it.
I can't wait.
It's happening. It's happening.
It is, baby. We're going to be on that steps of the Capitol. We're going to be celebrating that passage one day. I know we're going to be there together doing it.
We're going to do it. And I will be in my new sperm suit, which is actively getting made. I'm getting a new one made, baby.
Did you have to have the old one cleaned?
It is too disgusting for me to even put on anymore, okay? It can't be cleaned. Sperm can only be cleaned so much.
Thank you. That's where I was going with it. There are limitations. Dial is only going to go so far.
Oh my God, that thing is so synthetic. No soap can help it at this point.
Thoughts and prayers to your old sperm costume.
I mean, bless her. She did great, as much as she can. Best purchase I ever made on Amazon. But we'll be back for part 2. Go have a lovely day. Go give your kid a big hug, and a happy belated birthday to your wife. And we will be back.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Mwah.